Hi, I'm Raquel and welcome back to my channel. It was recently announced that The Last King of Fairy, which will be the first book in the trilogy that will conclude the Shadowhunter Chronicles, will be coming out later this year in November. Because of this, I thought now is as good a time as any to make this video discussing my unpopular opinions about the Shadowhunter Chronicles. I have been nervous to make this a video because these opinions, I think, are quite unpopular. At least I haven't heard these opinions being discussed amongst the fandom a lot. So correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Let's just get into it, okay? My first unpopular opinion is that the Shadowhunters suck. Let me expound upon that a little bit. So if you do me the favor, lower your pitchforks for just a moment and allow me to make my case. So what do I mean by the Shadowhunters suck? Ever since I read that first series, The Mortal Instruments, I always had a problem with the Shadowhunters. And I don't mean just the Clave, which is very apparent that you're supposed to dislike the Clave, the government that runs the Shadowhunters. They have a lot of outdated laws, very conservative, and are way too strict with their law. So I'm not talking about that, which we're supposed to dislike and distrust. I'm talking about even our main cast of Shadowhunters. Something just never set right with me, and I could never quite put my finger on why. Until years later, I'm talking about like, I think 2 years ago, it finally dawned on me. It's because Shadowhunters are basically cops, guys. I don't know if many people associate the Shadowhunters with cops, but especially since the BLM movement really made us hyper aware of how we treat law enforcement and how law enforcement treats us, and the problems, the inherent problems with law enforcement and cops. Ever since then, I have been trying to, I don't know if I want to say deconstruct, but definitely look deeper into how I perceive cops and how I interact with cops in our media, because I do watch a lot of Law & Order, SVU. I used to love Castle, Bones. So I watch a lot of cop media that nowadays some might consider propaganda. So I really had to sit with that and reflect on how I perceive cops. I'm not gonna go into all of my personal opinions about cops. I do think there's a problem. I think that it needs to be corrected. I think this is old news at this point, so I'm not really gonna go into it. But it did make me think about all the cop media that I consume and how they handle being cops and how they handle all that. Shadowhunters kept popping up in the back of my brain when I was thinking about all this. And I was like, why? They're not cops. They just enforce a law that governs a huge minority in their world. That's not, and I was like, oh, okay. That's how I realized Shadowhunters are cops, but they're actually worse than cops.
What do you mean by that?
They are worse than cops, in my opinion, because at least with law enforcement, that is a profession you choose to go into. Being a Shadowhunter is not something you choose to do. You just are. You were born a Shadowhunter. You are brought up in this world to believe in the Clave, believe in the laws that they practice. Even our characters, our main characters in the original series and after, believe in the law itself. They just think that the Clave is the problem and not the laws that they enforce, which I now, as a more mature adults have a huge problem with, because I don't think it's enough to recognize that your government is the problem, but I think you need to go a step further and dismantling your idea of the law that you enforce to really delve into, is this fair? And I don't think that the books do enough to really challenge the main characters, to really show that these characters are deconstructing what they have learned. They are... I hope this is making sense. I know that Shadowhunters in this world serve a very important role in keeping the peace and keeping mundanes safe from the downworlders, because you do have these magical minorities who kill people, eat people, sacrifice people to demons. So I understand why there needs to be precautions in place. What I don't get is, why does it have to be a whole race of people who think that they are better than the minorities that they are governing? That seems inherently wrong. And it has led, in the books, it has led to some unfortunate consequences because of that. And I've always understood the downworlders' plights and their hatred of Shadowhunters much more than I understood the laws that the Shadowhunters have in place and that they enforce. Because you have this race of people who think that they are better than you, governing you when you had no say in that in the first place. Like, you had no say in who governed you, what the laws were surrounding you that affected you, and you're just supposed to deal with it. I understand the animosity there. It's not right. I might be simplifying some things a little bit, but I do think my main point stands in that it's very messed up. I just think that the whole premise really of Shadowhunters as a race of people, their decree, their whole purpose in wanting to protect mundanes and govern the downworld, I think is a problem. Because you're telling me that these multiple races, warlocks, the fae, vampires, werewolves, all of these creatures, you're telling me these creatures that have been around longer than Shadowhunters themselves never thought to form their own governing body that would allow them to keep the peace between the mundanes, in which they share this world with. No, but you're telling me that every single one of these magical creatures are controlled by their bloodlusts and have no remorse for mundanes. At least enough of them to the point where they don't govern themselves? That just doesn't make sense to me. I feel like a lot of these downworlders, like, they want peace between the mundanes because they know that if they were to be exposed or if the balance was thrown off, it would mean trouble for them. So to me, it just makes sense that they would govern themselves. So I don't understand why we had to bring in a whole separate race of people to govern these downworlders. And then, of course, these Shadowhunters think that they are better and superior than the people they're governing, because that is literally their whole creed in life, is to protect mundanes and enforce these laws.
I'm not just like the rest of you. I'm stronger, I'm smarter, I'm better. I am better!
So I understand why they would have this superiority complex. I don't think it's right. And we've seen throughout the books that it leads to some very unfortunate consequences and some messed up situations. Hello, Valentine? I'm like, come on. And that's not, and I don't think that was ever addressed in a way that I was satisfied with. Like, his ideology came from a deep-rooted sense of beliefs that was passed on generation to generation to generation since the first Shadowhunter. And the only way to really root out that ideology and prevent other Valentines from happening is to uproot the whole system, blow it up, start from scratch. But they never do that. The closest thing we've ever gotten to that was in the last book of The Dark Artifices. Even then, I was like, too little too late, man. They have let this system go unchecked for too long that everything about it is poisoned. You need to toss everything out and start over, okay? But no, for the longest time, our characters have tried to work within the system itself. And that has not been proven to work at all. If it did, you wouldn't have all these villains and all this hatred for the Shadowhunters still persist. It's not enough to just have a few institutes who are good, like the New York Institute and the London Institute. My point is that Shadowhunters are, even our main cast of Shadowhunters, they're too in love with being Shadowhunters to ever really deconstruct all of their beliefs. They will always have this smidge of superiority over the downworlders they govern, who had no say in it. I remind you, they had no say in who governed them, which is wild to me. And then Shadowhunters wonder why downworlders hate them and don't want to help them and actively fight against them. Like, what? It reminds me of whenever there's like a protest and sometimes there is looting, and people get really aggressive and angry. We always go to, well, they shouldn't be doing this. They shouldn't be doing that. Like, that's so bad. This is why no one can see what they're fighting for. They only see the destruction that their causes. But no one ever goes to think, well, like, why are they so angry? Why do they feel the need for violence? Like, come on. It's a complicated topic. I'm aware of that. But I just think how Shadowhunters are portrayed, it's not it. It's just not it. Also, I want to make clear, I have no problem with this world having a governing body that is separate from the downworlders, but I do think the downworlders need to be involved with that governing body since they're the people that it's going to be governing. I think that just makes sense and is fair.
We interrupt this program.
Hi, editing Raquel here. I just wanted to come on and tell you that I'm aware that what I'm describing is a Downworlder Council that was added after the Mortal War, but it doesn't register here because that never really felt like a true solution to the Downworlder Shadowhunter problem. The problem being the animosity between the two. And to be fair, I don't think it was meant to be a permanent solution in the series. I think it was supposed to be like a stopgap because the real issue is way more complicated than that. But my problem is, like, in canon, the Downworlder Council has been going on for years, and I don't think it's working. And I think they need to rehaul the whole government, the whole clave needs to be destroyed and built from the ground up, incorporating downworlders in more affluent positions to affect real change, because the downworlder council that we have just feels like the clave was like, oh my god, thank you for helping us stop a genocidal maniac that was one of ours that was trying to commit genocide against your people. So here is a play position that doesn't really hold any actual power, but hold on, it does come with these sick chairs that have symbols on the head with that are represent your people. Doesn't that sound cool? And I'm like, no, it does not sound cool. I don't know why the clave sound like Valley Girls in my head. But so yeah, that's why when I'm describing a government that incorporates downworlders, the downworlder council that we have in the series doesn't click. It's not clocking to me in the moment. And that's all. So back to your regular scheduled programming. I also really don't like that Shadowhunters are basically a cult, because you are indoctrinated into the beliefs from birth, so you know nothing else, and they keep their Shadowhunters very excluded from the outside world. It's very frowned upon to socialize and immerse yourself in mundane culture, but also with the downworlders you're governing, by the way. So much to the point that if a Shadowhunter falls in love with a downworlder, they're a social pariah. But somehow falling in love with, not that downworlders are bad, love me, I prefer downworlders, to be honest. But it's somehow, in the society, it's worse to fall in love with a mundane, so much so that in order to be with them, you have to have your mark stripped. You literally have to stop being a Shadowhunter. You have to leave everything you've known since birth to be with the person you love. That's not right. Not enough people are talking about how that's not right. Now it's giving very culty. It's giving very much you come from a high control religion, and one of the signs of a high control religion is when you leave that religion, you are suddenly shunned from your family, your friends, everything that you have known. Reading these books, sometimes I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
Anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
I think there should have been a lot more characters who chose not to be Shadowhunters. I think that topic should have been addressed and brought up a lot more than it has, because as of now, we have two characters who have left the Shadowhunters. We have Tobias Herondale, which he was forced out of the Shadowhunting world because they thought that he abandoned his comrades, right? And then you have Edmund Arundel, who like literally fell in love with the mundane, and he was distraught because he had to choose to leave everything he's ever known just to be with the woman he loves. So those are the only two examples, and every time it is treated like not being a Shadowhunter is the worst thing you could possibly be. It's the worst thing you can choose, and it's the biggest punishment. I don't think that's right. I think you see all of these characters suffering so much just to be a Shadowhunter, and they still are like, even though this job that I was born into is causing me so much strife, has caused me to lose so many things, I still could never think of doing anything else. Yeah, do you know why you can never think of doing anything else? Because you're in a cult, and it's all you've ever known, okay?
Daddy, chill.
If you can't tell, I feel strongly about this. Just to prove my point about how brainwashed these kids are, because this is a young adult series, so we're following like young adults, 17, 18, 19, you get the point. They, like, you have even the half Fae Shadowhunters, right? Even these Shadowhunters who are half Fae, they have a whole other heritage and culture, but they never choose to explore it, which I will delve more into when I get to my second point. But they never even choose to explore it because they could not think of being anything else other than a Shadowhunter. And to be fair to them, their people and the laws they abide by don't give them the opportunity or chance to explore that side of them. Because it's either you are a Shadowhunter or you're not. No in between, right? You can't possibly, like, at least with people who are Amish have Rumspringa, right? They can choose to explore the outside world a bit and choose whether or not they want to return, right? No, Shadowhunters don't get that choice. No, it's either you're in or you're out. It's like, dang! Like, what? Am I a Shadowhunter or am I in a gang? Like, I don't know. You spot the difference. It's really, just really messed up. Okay, enough about that. If you're still here and you haven't rage quit, thank you. Thank you for hearing me out, okay? So my second unpopular opinion is that the Fae have been mistreated, not only by the narrative, but by the author. Not so sure that's the same thing. I don't know. The biggest problem with the Fae and how they are portrayed in the Shadowhunter books is a problem that I have with many fantasy books and media in general. I hate when these types of media portray an entire race as evil and bad. I don't like it. One, I think it's sort of lazy writing. And two, I just never believe that an entire race is evil or bad. It's just never believable to me, right? The only time I like authors, directors, writers, including like that trope is when we're deconstructing it, is when we are subverting expectations and or we're actually exploring that, like, no, everything that you thought you knew about this one race is a lie. It's propaganda. Of course, not all of them are evil, right? You have this one sect and people latched onto it and then they labeled the entire race evil because of a few bad apples, right? So that's the only time I'm actually into this trope. And Shadowhunters, one might argue that they do that, right? That they say, oh, not the entire race is evil. I don't know what books you were reading if you argue this, because I don't think we're reading the same books. In the entire series, but the only ones that I can think of, you have Meliorn. Maybe he did like let his queen poison or the Shadowhunters once, right? At like a dinner. And then you have Gwen of the Wild Hunts. And even he was made to seem like him and his whole hunt, they were at the outskirts of Fae society. So did that rub me wrong? And then you had Kieran, who he himself was more sympathetic because he was also an outcast in the Fae society, right? And he was also the love interest for Mark and I forgot that girl's name. When I remember in post, I'll put it up here, her name. But yeah, so he was the love interest for those two as well, right? Out of this entire chronicle of books, you have 3 characters that I can name that were portrayed as good, or at the very least, not cartoonishly evil? Well, you might be asking yourself, well, Raquel, if you have a problem with an entire race being portrayed as evil, why don't you have a problem with demons? The answer to that is because demons, they aren't, very superficially, they aren't humanoid, right? They are portrayed as these grotesque monsters. So it's kind of hard to have sympathy and look at them as people when they aren't portrayed as people. But Fae have a whole culture. They literally have a whole other world that they come from. They have a queen, they have monarchy, they have families, they have interesting dynamics. They are a people, they are a race of people, unlike demons, which aren't really portrayed as being anything other than monsters that we have to get rid of. And this is where my problem with this whole trope of labeling an entire race as evil comes from. When you have a race of people, they have a culture. And when you label an entire race as evil, specifically the Fae and the Shadowhunter books, what they are really upset about is the Fae culture, their culture. And what does that sound like? You are upset and you look down upon this race of people because their culture is different to you. I will grant you, some of their culture includes with messing with mundanes, which is not cool. Okay, I will grant you that. But you're telling me every Fae you meet, their defining characteristic is just messing with mundanes and being a thorn in the Shadowhunter's side? No. Like, what? No. And then if it is, like, Cassandra, why did you write this? Why did you write them that way? You're telling me that we have many warlock characters who some are portrayed as being cultists and evil, and then you have those like Magnus, who is a friend to the Shadowhunters. Also, you're telling me the only good downworlder are the ones who are friends with the Shadowhunters? I don't love that, okay? But yeah, so we have a diverse group of warlocks. We don't have that with the Fae. Like I said, we only have 3 that are portrayed as anything other than bad. Okay, that's not enough to really argue that the entire race isn't evil, right? For the most part, when you meet a Fae, they're antagonistic. You know, oh, that's going to be the villain of this book, or oh, they are not going to be helpful to our main characters, which in turn, we are not going to root for this Fae character, right? So it would have been so easy for Cassandra to write a couple of Fae characters like she wrote vampires, werewolves, and warlocks, which we spent a lot of time with, and there are many differing characters with differing opinions, and we can't really label one character's beliefs as the beliefs of that entire magical race. We can't do that. But with the Fae, the most prominent character is the Fae Queen, and she's psychotic. So that doesn't really bode well for the rest of the Fae race. And then when we did delve deeper into the Fae in the Dark Artifices, we got Kieran, which he's lovely, like, yes. But then from his story, even he was really belittled by his own people and has to side with the Shadowhunters and sort of betray his people. So they're like, are you kidding me? Like, so even the one true Fae character we get who has a whole character journey is outcast by his own people. I was really excited when we met the the Unselly King. I was really excited, and I was like, oh, okay, so maybe it's just the Selly Queen who is completely insane and evil. Maybe the king is her opposite and is actually good, reasonable, and will be a force of good in the plot. But no, I don't. I will tell you, it's been a really long time since I read the Dark Artifices. I read them when they first came out, 2018. So I don't remember everything, but I don't think he was the force of good that I was wanting him to be. I think what I remember is that they got like, they had a really bad divorce. The Selly Queen and the Unselly King. That's really all I remember. So I don't. Is every time I get hope, she crushes it. The narrative just crushes it down to dust. They're like, oh, you thought that there was actually gonna be a large group of pretty good Fae characters? Nope, you're wrong. I'm gonna go back to the last point I made about my unpopular opinion about Shadowhunters is, so then you have Shadowhunter, then you have half Shadowhunters who are half Fae and half Shadowhunter. And they never explore their Fae heritage. But I understand you not wanting to explore that side when every Fae you come across is psychotic. It would have been way more interesting if you had half Fae Shadowhunters actually choose to explore that side of their heritage and step away from being a Shadowhunter. Yes, shadow hunting is all that they have known, but they also have known ridicule because of their half-Fae heritage. And you're telling me none of them are the least bit resentful? Some of them are, I think, but not enough in my opinion. I want at least some of them, because there's a surprising amount of half-Fae Shadowhunter characters, right? And you're telling me not one of them wanted to go to Fairy. You're telling me not one of them wanted to delve deeper into the Downworlder community, which they are a part of because of their Fae lineage. Like, I would have been okay with that. I would have been over the moon if you had these half-Fae Shadowhunters who actually were like, you know what? Shadow hunting isn't for me, especially when all you really seem to do is diminish me and outcast me. I'm looking at you, Helen. Like, come on. Why didn't she, oh, because she was in love with the Shadowhunter, of course. Why couldn't she fall for a Downworlder and then leave the Shadowhunting community to be a part of the Downworlder community? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Because at least I understand a little bit the Shadowhunters who fall in love with Mundanes and then having their marks stripped. Well, you no longer have your marks. You're no longer, you're choosing not to be a Shadowhunter. So I sort of understand them being outcast in the mundane world. But with half-Fae Shadowhunters, if they have their marks stripped, they're still half-Fae. They can't really, blend into the mundane world as easily, right? There's not really a place for them, but there is a place in the Downworlder community because they are half-Fae, so they are half Downworlder. Why can't you have some of them lean into that part of themselves? But no, all of them just seem to be so die-hard Shadowhunters, even when they know how cruel Shadowhunters can be. They never think, well, let me go hang out with the Downworlder community full time, right? Let me give up the Shadowhunting business. Nope. You're not one of them knows where they're not wanted. It really bothers me if you can't tell. Okay, my last unpopular opinion is a petty one. Julian Blackthorne can go suck a dick. He can go suck a donkey dick. I loathe him as a character. He was the worst part of the Dark Artifices. We all love a morally gray character, and Julian Blackthorne was written to be morally gray. He does a lot of despicable things, he does a lot of not so good things, all in the name of keeping his family together, which is noble and is very sympathetic. My problem is he doesn't face any consequences for his actions. He doesn't face any consequences for some of the deplorable things that he did. And you're asking me, what? Like, Raquel, what deplorable things? What did he really do that was that bad? He just lied to the Clave, which you already established you don't like, and we're not supposed to like. So why is that so hard to wrap your brain around and come around to? Well, I'm not talking about that. Yes, I don't, like, it shows how manipulative and selfish and how ready he is to bend the law. And when you have law enforcement bending the law, hot take, I don't love that. They'd rather bend the law than uproot the whole system. I'm not gonna get into it. But I will get into it actually. The reason we don't like law enforcement bending the law is because who says it stops at a law that doesn't make sense? Who says it stops at this one thing that we can agree with him about, right? Who says it's not bending other laws? It's not good. It's just not good. When you have your law enforcement constantly bending the laws, maybe your laws are broken. And maybe these law enforcements need to fight for better laws instead of just working within the system and taking it at face value and being okay with other people suffering from these laws as long as the ones that they care about and are okay by themselves bending those laws. Okay, I'm done. So yes, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what he did to Diana. If you didn't think I was getting heated before, just wait. When he finds out that Diana is a trans woman, he uses that as leverage so she won't go to the Clave and rat him out, right? He uses it as some sort of mutual destruction. But mutual destruction, my ass, okay? It's not the same. The Clave finding out that you have been lying to them to keep your family together is not the same as them finding out that Diana is a trans black woman. Your punishments are going to be disproportionate. But no, all Julian can think about is himself and his family, which, fine, I understand, it's your family, you barely know Diana, okay? But the narrative doesn't treat the situation with the gravitas it deserves. No, in fact, Diana forgives Julian and respects it. Respect what? He was willing to rat you out so fast if you betrayed him. He did not give an iota of a shit about you. Why are you respecting this man? Why are you forgiving this man? Okay, you can help. She could have helped Julian and the family without forgiving him, right? She could have been like, two wrongs don't make a right. I'm not going to let the Clave break up your family, but I'm also not ready to forgive you for willing to throw me under the bus, willing to ruin my entire life. But no, everyone just has to fall for Julian's charms and his bad boy esque persona, and they just have to admire the lengths he's willing to go to protect his family. Boo! Here's a really hot take. I don't give a crap about his family. I'm sorry, they would have been fine, okay, if they were split. Like, it would have sucked really bad. I'm not going to hold you, it would have sucked, but they would have been fine, okay? They would have found each other eventually. Like, it would have been fine. But do you know whose life would not have been fine? Diana's, okay? She grew up and she is involved in this super high control, super conservative organization. So she doesn't have the luxury of just waiting it out until she's a little older. No, this is her life. This is her career. Like, he would have ruined her entire life. And I feel like the narrative I feel like the narrative doesn't address that, and it does not, it just passes by it. Which, ooh. Don't get me wrong, I love that Cassandra Clare included a Black trans woman as one of the main side characters of this book series, The Dark Artifices. And she is a badass character. I love her romance with Gwen. I think it's so sweet. She's a strong character, love that. But one of the things that I think she really messed up on was the whole blackmail situation. I feel like Diana should never have forgave Julian, should have honestly washed her hands with the family after all of this was over. I don't care that she kind of lived with them for a couple years. I don't care. I think that speaks more to me than anything, honestly, and how bitter of a person I am and how I can hold a grudge like nobody's business.
Make some noise if you are bitter!
But I think that she should have been a lot more upset at Julian. And held a little bit of a grudge. I'm not saying she had to be like me, but she could have held a little bit more of a grudge. Like, come on, girl, I know you have it in you. So I just could not forgive Julian after that. And besides that, I find his character insufferable. Just as a character, I don't like the whole tortured artist thing he has going on. I have so much weight on my shoulders, I can't possibly try to lean on anyone else or find help in any others. I can't possibly lean on my parabatai who's there. Oh God, Okay, while we're here and while I'm feeling a little spicy, let's get into the parabatai of it all. I don't like parabatai. I think it's a stupid concept. It sounds like some fan fiction trash. And hey, I write fan fiction, so I can say that. There are some really great fan fiction out there. There are even some great fan fiction that deal with cheesy tropes, but they're amazingly written and they get you so in your feels and they're so emotional. Parabatai, yeah, it's not that. It serves no purpose to any plot other to add angst. Whenever parabatai are brought up in the story, you know angst is gonna follow, and I just hate it. I was rooting for Emma to destroy the parabatai rune. I was like, ooh, yes, ooh, yeah, okay. I knew it was a trap. I knew that the Fairy Queen had no good intentions behind it, but I was just like, ooh, I was living for it. I was like, ooh. But no, of course, she had to chicken out at the last moment. And she's like, oh, I can't like separate all these parabatai. I'm like, why? Do it. It's weird anyway. It's weird and codependent and like, why? Like, isn't it just enough to be friends, to be best friends, especially since none of these parasite can date, so they can't explore that really tight bond that they all have. They just have to be like super good friends. And I'm not saying that you can't be super close with someone without it having to be inherently romantic. I'm not saying that, but I am saying if there wasn't this rule at first that I feel like a lot of us thought was stupid, that you couldn't date your parabatai, but then we find out in this book it's because like if you do, like, ooh, all hell's gonna break loose. There's actually a good reason behind that one. But despite that, like, you just can't date your parabatai. I feel like if the whole them turning into true Nephilim thing wasn't a thing and you could actually date your parabatai, it would have a lot more, you would have a lot more parabatai that would be dating, right? And then that's a whole other dynamic that you can throw into the mix. For those of you who like jealousy, I don't. But for those of you who do, can you imagine how like much you would be eating if you had someone dating a Shadowhunter with a parabatai and then them being jealous of that parabatai because like, oh my god, y'all are so close. Like, I'm a little jelly. Like, I don't like how that makes me feel. You could have so many storylines with that, right? Then you can have the mature ones who are like, I know you have a parabatai and you're super close, but I trust you, right? So the narrative options are endless. But no, it's just there to be weird. I don't like it. Like, what? You have a parabatai, so runes work stronger on you guys when you apply them to each other. You kind of have this second hand in combat. Okay, cool. Ooh, you know who else has a second hand in combat? People who've been fighting with each other for years in combat have that second hand. It's not inherent to parabatai, right? It's just, I don't like it. I don't know why it's here. I honestly don't know why it's here. Like, couldn't you, instead of being like, oh, Jason, Alec, or parabatai, couldn't it just be like, oh, they're best friends. They're really good friends. Why did you have to make it weird to say parabatai? I don't like it. Why do I feel like out of all my hot takes, that one is gonna have me up on the cross? Like, I don't know. I do not like parabatai, and I don't like Julian Blackthorn. I did not find his romance with Emma to be anything other than nauseating. I don't like that you're telling me that all of these years you're still hung up on this sad emo boy. Like, he got you down bad like that? Oh god, try to move on, Emma.
Because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you over again.
Please try. I think it would have been a much more interesting story and conclusion if they were still parabatai at the end of this and Emma had to get over Julian. Like, and I think it would have been an important lesson for many people that just because you have these feelings and emotions towards someone for some reason or another, they are just not right for you. Like in this case, it could be outside forces out of your control. They're just not right for you. You just can't be together. So you have to accept it, move on, and find love in someone else. And it would be a great message that you would find love, that they are not your one and only chance at it. Like, how mature of a conversation would that be? How mature of a conclusion and of the ending? How unique would that be? Because that does not happen a lot, okay? In these types of books. I just did not like the romance, mostly because her romantic interest was Julian. So those are my unpopular Shadowhunter opinions. After getting all of this out, I honestly don't know if I even want to continue in the series. I do really like Kit and Ty. I'm so happy that they're gonna be the main character along with Livy. So I want to read it for that, but honestly, if it does not end with the Shadowhunters as an organization being disbanded, I don't think there's enough Prozac in the world to calm me down if that were to happen or not to happen. So I don't know. Anyway, thank you for listening to all of my unpopular opinions on Shadowhunters. If you did stick around, thank you for clicking on my face, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Bye!